Thanks for joining us. Today we are going to look at some PowerPoint tricks and tips of how to improve your PowerPoint. And I'm really happy to have Renata here. Renata, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Helen. My name is Renata Mares, and I'm a public health consultant and a sessional lecturer at one of the universities here in Canada.
Brilliant. And so what you did was sent me some slides. Do you want to tell me a little bit about the context of how you created these slides, or for what event?
Sure. So the slides I sent you were from my TEDx talk, and it was actually in support of my students who were not very motivated studying nursing during pandemic. And so I told them that if they go and complete their assignments, I would do a TEDx
I love it.
on the topic of reimagining nursing and healthcare profession. And
Brilliant.
so that's what I did. Yes.
A great motivator, a great motivator. And I understand for you that when you were recording the TEDx, you didn't have a live audience, and that made it a little bit more difficult as well, right?
Well, for the logistics of the presentation, not having a live audience was actually good for me, because then that way I could just focus on the talk. My biggest issue was that it was a student production, and they did not warn me that I will not have a prompter. And so I have my notes with memorizing some of it, but I got into this black room. I didn't have a clicker, so I had to use my mouse on my left thigh and my notes on my right hand. And so it was quite overwhelming, because I wanted to do such a good job, and I didn't know. I'm still not sure if that, motivation came through, or sort of my goals, messages of my story came through.
Okay, so we're going to put the link to the TEDx talk wherever we post this video, so people can look to see what it was. But I think that's already not really related to the PowerPoint, but it's a good lesson that we need to be ready to adapt to the situation, but even better, to ask the right questions before we get to present somewhere, to know what the setup's going to be so that we can prepare in advance. So maybe if you'd known that you would not have a clicker, you may have used less animation and possibly less slides altogether, so that you would not be distracted with that. So there's a whole lot of things in there that are the good lessons for us already. Brilliant. So we're going to go through your slides, and I've got a few lessons that I want to share with you by using your slides as examples. But before we get started, I wanted just to remind everyone, and I need reminder as well, that PowerPoint is a tool and it is a visual aid. And when I talk about PowerPoint, it can be Keynote, it can be Google Slides, whatever. The slide deck is a visual aid. It's not your presentation. It does not replace what you say. It does not replace you as the presenter. It is supposed to help the audience give a visual clue which backs up what you're saying, or helps their understanding, their learning, getting the message across. So whenever we're creating a presentation where we think we want slides, what I recommend is that you have a good outline of the flow and structure of your presentation before you open the slide deck and decide what images you want to show. Because as we'll see, sometimes you probably didn't need a slide at all, and sometimes it's nice to just be the presenter and speak directly to the audience and not have the noise of slides. So really important, create your presentation before you create your slides. And it sounds easy, but often our reflex is to open PowerPoint and just start fiddling with fonts and finding photos and things. So do that first, get the habit of, even if it's jotting it down on paper, an idea of your structure before you do that. So the first one I wanted to talk about was exactly related to that, which is the visual aid. So anything that whenever we create a slide, we want to make it as visual as possible. And you know this, you all know this, that we need to have images. This is what we need. Sometimes you may have something you want people to read or look at. For example, a graph. I imagine in your work, Renata, you will have graphs or diagrams that you need to work people through. And that's fine, but you need to know that we can't read and listen at the same time. When you are speaking to me and you're showing me something, I need to make a decision. Am I going to read it and stop listening, or am I going to listen to you and basically stop looking at the slides? So it is a decision you're making people work. So there are a couple of different ways around that. Either you pause and you let people read, if it's a quote or if it's something that you really want them to look at, to decipher a graph, etc. Just be silent for a moment. You say, this is what you're seeing, and just give them that space. It can feel awkward to hold that space, that pause, but it can be really powerful. The other way you can do it is simply to read it out to them. So this is really great if you have a nice quote. So you can have it written, but you also read it at the same time. So we're not making that decision between reading and listening. And the other thing is just simply to have nothing. So you can speak. You don't need to have a slide for every single thing you say. So a couple of examples here. Renata, I'll share your slide deck now with everyone. So I'm going to share it not in presenter mode so that we can see also what you've done here. So one example here is your second slide. You see here, so throughout your slide deck, you have some really powerful images of nurses and other healthcare professionals putting up messages during COVID about the stress they were under and the challenges they were having, which is powerful because it speaks to emotion. However, here, if you read, there's a lot of words. If there were 2 or 3 words, it would pass. But this, I can't listen to you. So you can see your speaker notes here. This is your opening especially, and it's very powerful. I'm standing here because my students shared their secrets with me. But if you have that on the screen, I'm looking at that. Imagine starting your career at 22 and constantly hearing, get out. So I'm either deciding I'm going to read that quote, which is very powerful, or listen to you. So I'm torn. So if you decide to do one or other, so you can be the voice of this nurse, or maybe you start with a blank slide instead. Another example would be this one here. So here you bring in nicely. I'm a huge fan of simple animation to help us follow. But again, for me, the words don't really add anything to what you're saying. And especially, especially the last one, I have to read a lot to understand what even it is. I see it's probably a post on LinkedIn, something like that. But I need to stop talking. I need to stop listening to you to actually read it. Again, you did a nice thing because you circled something that makes it jump out at us. So very effective. But I just question the use of all the words. It's all this evidence that you probably don't need to get your message across. Maybe another one here would be a very simple one. This one, for example. It is I think it's a book cover name, but there's so many words there that you need to stop talking for me to read it. And again, I'm not sure. It's a book about what you're talking about, but it's not key to me understanding your message. It's something that you could leave as a reference later, or you could talk directly about this. Because if I look at your, you talk about the new study by Sell and Team, but it's the messages that you want to get across. It's not the title, or it's the 10 times more. But you could just go 10 times more. That would be stronger than having the title of the research. Does that make sense? Or the quote? So it's just too much. Maybe there's one more here. Again, here I'm torn. really, really powerful image. What we see here is, you know, when you were born, your life past up to the present, and then all of the choices that you have, which is great. And that's a very powerful message. And it shows it well in the image, but you don't even, it illustrates what you're saying, but you don't talk about it. So then I stopped listening to you. I'm like, oh, that's a really cool way of looking at things, right? So it kind of defeats the purpose of the message and the image at the same time, which is a real pity. So one way of doing this would be you say, this image shows when you were born and where your path has got to here. You had different versions of where you could get to today, and this is the path you took. From here, you know, the world is your oyster. You have lots of options. And then you could say your message. So you would walk us through what we're seeing, so we're all on the same page, and I'm not torn to decide whether I'm deciphering the image or listening to you.
Right.
Does that make sense, Renata?
Very much so. Thank you for walking me through on all the ways I can strengthen this.
And at the end, I'll go through your whole PowerPoint, and I've got some other, you know, tweaks that I think you could probably do. Options. There's no right and wrong way of doing things, but there are definitely other ways of doing things. To again, the whole point is for your message to really pop out and to touch those students like you wanted it to, rather than get distracted by different images and different words. So first lesson.
And you're actually highlighting, because I am used to, as a lecturer, I'm used to making my slides not as a tool, but really helping students to create study notes about the large amount of reading that they have to do. And so telling a story at TEDx, I thought I had less content on my slides, but it shows that it's still quite lecture focused rather than
a lot less lecture focused than I have seen with similar people in your role, Renata. But this comes on to another little tip that I have, is that you should, for a lecturer, if you're teaching, you should probably have two sets of slides. One that you speak to, so that it illustrates what you are saying, and a second version, which probably you start with, which is the lecture notes. So it makes me laugh sometimes when people are asked to send their slides before or after, you know, to an event, a conference or whatever. And I think, if the presenter's done a good job, those slides mean nothing without the presenter, right? So it's okay to do two versions. So sometimes it's good to do the longer, wordier version, so you can figure out, you know, if this was a standalone document, it becomes a document, not a PowerPoint slide or a visual aid, what would I include and how would I illustrate? And then you do a lightened version that you speak to. So I know it's extra work, but otherwise just send them the document. You know, like what is the added value of you being there speaking to the information?
Exactly.
So that's lesson number one. When you include text, remember you're giving people, making them make a choice between reading or listening to you. So be careful there and really get into their shoes and think, okay, I'm saying this, and this is what I'm seeing. Does it help or not? And often less is more. The other one is the next lesson. Lesson 2 is simple is best. So it's related to what we're talking about. So too often when we see a slide, our eyes are attracted by different colors, different sizes, different images, and our eyes dart around. There's research showing, you know, what people do with different slides, and they're sort of, I'm exaggerating now, but you can dart around. So you need to be very conscious of where people are being drawn. Again, it's not them reading in a book, which you read differently from when you're watching something either online or in person, okay? So we need to be very careful about our use of images and text and colors and fonts and sizes and things, because they need to mean something. So for example, I'll share my screen again. If we go to slide 4, Okay. Now I realize, and this will be very common in your type of work, Renata, that you are taking images or diagrams or infographics from someone else. But the problem is with this slide, even though you have brought it up with animation, so you bring in the first half and then the second half, I just cannot concentrate on the slide. One, it's too small for me to read, but two, I just go backwards and forwards.
Yes.
You know, and it's a pity because it's actually really powerful, but
Yes.
it's the sort of image that you need to leave people space, or you need to talk them through. And I've redone the slide, I hope in a useful way for you at the end of our discussion, so that you can see another way of doing it. And again, yes, it means extra work because you need to almost redo the infographic so that it meets your purpose. But in this case, I think it would help. So that's, yeah, it needs to be simplified, or it needs to be explained.
Yes.
So this is the evolution of the organization. This is the past. It was like this, then it went to future like this, and you really need to talk people through it, because as you speak to it, I get why it's a nice infographic, but what you say, it doesn't really, I need more time to look at it compared to what you're saying. So it's not necessarily the best one to use, I think, to get your message across there. So as I said, I've got a good way of simplifying that. I think it's a good way. And then this one, similar. And you even say, it's funny, you say, well, this is a messy slide. It's trying to show that disrupts. Well, if it's a messy slide, you know, I often hear this, oh, you probably can't read that, or, yeah, sorry, the font is too small, or, yeah, this is really crazy. Then don't, you know, if you find yourself saying that, it kind of means it's probably not the one that's going to help the person understand the message you're trying to get across here. Simply too much in there for anyone to read or understand. So maybe, you know, simple things, you could just use the headings: leadership, industry practices, disrupting nursing, disrupting education, or you just choose an illustration for each. And I know that you've reused some of those images other places in your slides. So yeah, I know that you want to that you've done the research, you know what you're saying, you know what you're talking about, you're well connected to what's happening. But this for me shows that, and it might be okay in a lecture setting, but really in a TEDx talk, it really needs to pop. And you don't want to give the audience a lot of work to do. Do you know what I mean? And I know it's hard because you're like, well, this really demonstrates exactly what I wanted to show, but it just requires too much work on the audience's behalf. So yeah, I think, you know, the other thing, if you really like this image, you could make 4 slides out of it so we can actually see it. So you'd have one slide on leadership, one slide on industry practices, etc., etc. There's no reason for them to all be together necessarily. I mean, you could say there are multiple healthcare descriptors, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you could have a slide, if you like those images, you have a slide just with the leadership and just the next one. When you put things on a slide, you need to think, is there a reason that they all need to be together? Like, we need to be able to compare them, see how they come together. And I also noticed, you know, this is an image you've borrowed, so you can't even cut it up easily. You'd have to recreate it. So I just, yeah, big question whether this is helpful. for the audience.
So may I just add to what you're saying, because just yesterday my students were presenting their presentations, and we came to the conclusion of being a tour guide of your slide.
Nice.
Right? So literally we were just discussing that. And the second thing is, so personally, with the TEDx, I thought if my slide is busy, people would pause the video and then they could look at it. So my brain is going, in the one hand, I'm teaching, you know, what I say and not I do. But at the other end, I'm also thinking forward of the logistics of, oh, they can pause the video and look at it. So those two things were sort of in my mind. The student who built that slide was, you know, like a last minute thing. So I recognize that it may not be helpful, particularly for my purpose, but just know that what you're teaching me, I'm also teaching further. And so I need to be a better practitioner.
But, you know, they always say you need to walk the talk, and I'm going to throw a few, you know, idioms in there, but there's a saying, at least in English, about the cobbler, so the person who makes the shoes. The kids go barefoot, right? So I totally get what you say, but I'm going to steal that, Renata. You're the tour guide of your slide. Do you mind? I will quote you because it's lovely. Yeah? No, but it's right. I mean, so we know a lot of this stuff, but when we're doing it ourselves, it can be difficult. It's true that, you know, if you're watching this TEDx, you could pause and look, but especially, and I don't remember exactly in yours when we could see the whole slide deck, but it's rare that the TEDx is taken with the speaker and the slide together. Like there are moments, but it's not all the time. So plus for a TEDx, it's supposed to be done live in front of an audience, so they can't pause. So if you wanted to, you could say, I'm just going to pause for a moment so you can have a look. And that's absolutely fine to do. You could do that. So that could be something you could do next time, definitely.
For sure.
So then the next lesson is the quality of images. It's really important because you want to come across as pro, as knowing what she's talking about, caring what she talks about, right? All these things. The quality of the images matters. And so there are quite a few images in your slide deck, and I know you know this, that are not very good quality. And it's a real pity because it just brings down, it's like, she didn't spend enough care on it, or she doesn't care enough, or, you know. And the thing is, it does take it, again, a little bit more work, but there are a lot of royalty-free images that we can use these days. We're so lucky. One is directly through PowerPoint, if you use PowerPoint, and I think the other systems as well. If you go insert image, stock images, there are some beautiful images and they are royalty free. You can just pop them directly into your slide deck. So, you know, really look at the quality, and if it's not good enough quality, probably do without and find something else, or do without an image altogether. And actually, I've got a list of places that you can go to find some royalty-free images, you know, that you can use. So let me just have a look. A couple of images here. Page 8, slide 8, for example. This one, it's a great photo, but it's so pixelated. You know, you can even see between them the quality.
Yes.
And it's such a pity, especially, you know, for you on a TEDx stage, the screen is pretty big, so it's even worse. You know, it's like really, it's fuzzy. So it's a real pity. And then there's this one, even this one. Now, there are probably even functionalities you can improve the quality of this sort of thing. I don't know. You know, if you made it smaller, it would probably be fine. It's much better. But, you know, it just doesn't work how big it is, because again, not only does it tell me that you're maybe a bit rushed or you didn't really know how to do this thing, but it also tells me, or it gives me the message that I have to work hard, because when I have to read or look at something that's pixelated, it's not a pleasant thing. So, you know, I think sometimes either find a better quality image or simply do without. And I've got some examples of how you can do without. Does that make sense as well?
Absolutely, yes.
And I know there are, you know, there are quite a few, like this one's okay, but if we made it bigger, it would suddenly, you know, it becomes pixelated. So you just have to be careful as soon as you play with an image that you can distort it. I mean, this one's nice and clear, which is just so much more pleasant. Okay. Any questions on that?
No, this is very helpful. Thank you.
Cool. So we have covered when you include text, you're making a decision between whether they're listening to you or reading. So be careful with that. Simple is best, to know that our eyes search the slide for meaning and tend to dart around. So again, simple is best. Break things down, especially graphs, images, infographics, and things like that. Be careful with the use of color. And third, you know, if you're using images, use quality images. It's a small tweak, but it sends a message that you care and that you're aiming for some a level of quality. So then I have gone through your slide deck, and I've got some suggestions. So I just want to share that with you. I'm going to go into the review mode. So we didn't cover the whole thing, but I'm going to come in here. So stop me when you want, but I have shown the original, what it looked like, and then how I think you could do it different. As I said, there's no right and wrong, but some suggestions. And stop me when you like. So nursing workforce reimagined, that's what you had. Now the original, you have these images, which again are very powerful. What I notice is your animation, you had to click. So I am clicking each time to get these images up, right? And I can go fast or slow, especially in your circumstances. That would have been kind of annoying. So a very simple tweak. So we've talked about the quality of the images, but in a way this shows the quantity, and so it passes, I think, for the message that you want to start with. It's kind of, it's almost good that it's too much and they're not great images because it's sort of overwhelming. Simple thing, my version, hands-free, you can time it, and maybe this is too fast, but you can time it. Just one less thing for you to worry about, right? For them to come in. Really little tweak, but otherwise I think this slide works quite well because it gives a sense of, yeah, I remember those times, and oh my God, the nurses were suffering. We've talked about the next slide. Honestly, I would just speak to the camera. You talk about, I think your notes are something about, this is your beginning, right? You're talking about why you're standing there because your nurse has told you a secret. So I would rather just focus in on Renata and hear her voice and what's the secret you're going to be told. The image doesn't add anything. Just hold their attention with your voice and your intensity, and you'll hook people right from the beginning. I think that's more powerful than an image where the quality is not great and I have to read instead of listen to you. Okay, so don't be afraid of using blank pages. The next one, this one, really powerful image, but again, you probably see now, there's quite a lot of words in there. They're almost your bullet points of what you want to talk about. So one thing I think you should do is just focus on the image. You don't need to say,
yeah, so much better,
right? But it's such I mean, it's tiny and the quality isn't even that great, but it's just, that is the hero of the slide. We're focusing on that woman. You can say the statistics, right? Or another way of doing it is just popping up the statistics. Just 68%. Just that big 68%, nothing else. And you say 68%, that is the number of nurses who have declared that they will leave the profession by 2025, and then we're like, whoa, 68%. Okay. Now this one we've talked about, great infographic, very good for a document, well thought through. When I was redoing it, I was like, actually, this is pretty good what they've done. I like that it is visual, that you've got like the past, which is in black, and the future, which is in color, but it's just too much. Part one, part two, and it's just like too much stuff. Okay. So one way you could do it is a bit of work, but you redo it. The world of work is evolving. Now, throughout your slide deck, you had nice moments where you just wrote a simple word or two words. And so I retook that because I think it's really powerful. It's not too many words. It's echoing what you say. We don't focus on anything else. So you start with that. Then you bring in the pieces that you want in the past and then in the future. The past, and I just took some examples. In the past, we were siloed. This department not talking to that department. This type of nurse not talking to that type of nurse. The future, we're going to see more connection. We're going to be more connected as a workforce. In the past, we really focused on the needs. There was a criteria. We needed to tick the boxes. In the future, we need to focus on wants, not needs. What do we want? Not just filling in the form. In the past, I used images that were easy for me. So in the past, we were slow to adapt. We were like the turtle, moving really, really slowly. But now, coming into the future, we know the change is rapid, and we need to be quick to adapt. So just simple images. You talk to them as you bring them in. We focus on them. We get them. I love using icons like that. Again, they're free within PowerPoint that you just pull in and make them all look the same. I'm no designer, but using something like this could be really effective, and there are people who can do it much better than me, but I think this works much better than the way before. No.
I love it. Like everything you're showing me is just like, I'm doing it. I'm doing it. Yeah, no, this is fantastic. This is so cool.
It's simple, but it just makes it clearer. It becomes a visual aid for what you're saying. Now, again, as I said, I like this, the secret. However, what have I done there? I have just changed from all capitals to sentence case. Oh, it's title case, actually, with the S also capital. Now, the reason for that is, and most people don't know, when we have capitals, it makes a word difficult to decipher because it all looks the same. So it's a block. So if you have a whole sentence in all capitals, it takes us longer. There's research that shows it takes us longer to decipher. So this is why you have to be very careful. You can use it, but you have to be very careful when you use it. And it's just easier if you put it in lowercase. People can quicker. You don't want to make it hard for the audience again, right? So simple little trick that makes things a little bit easier. Again, these are lovely images that you've used. You've used the animation, what we think in reality. Now, for me, there is a reason that you've got both on the same page. But you kind of want an oomph a little bit here, I think, because they're nice images as well. So what I suggest is, bang, it's the whole page. Now, obviously, a better quality image would be better, but this one is okay. What we think, ... So I'm using that again, the way that you've used the words. And you talk about, oh, you're so great, you're a hero. Oh, you're also heroes, blah, 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 blah. But in reality, we don't want to be. And then you explain why. So I just question why you would have two images, and then I'm torn between both of them, and I keep looking back and forwards to them. Whereas if you just have one, you're like, oh yeah, woohoo, well done, the nurses. And then, well, actually, they're not happy.
Yes, I like it. I do.
So this one again, you've got the original. Be careful when you write Shutterstock. I understand giving kudos to whoever has created the image, but here like that, it's actually one of the, I keep looking at it because it's black and it pops out at me on a white background. And also a little bit disturbed because we have a picture, which the quality isn't great, okay, but I didn't actually do much about that. And then an infographic, and I'm like, it would be better if both are infographics or both are photos. So one thing I did, let's focus on this one. The world is in our hands. It's when I remember what you said, something about when you first become a nurse or want to train as a nurse, you're like, oh, I'm going to help heal the world, and I'm going to be at everyone's service. And then, this image, it's very powerful, but it's not an infographic. So it kind of, there's a more gentle transition from a photo to a photo. This was a stock image. I didn't buy it. I think it was directly from PowerPoint. So, and then it's very powerful. We're listening to you. We're listening to what you say. We're not jumping between. Does that make sense?
So good. Like I'm getting goosebumps just as you're talking. It's like it's not even my presentation.
But this is the thing as well. It needs to become your presentation again. Okay. I don't like to do presentations for other people. And I think it's very difficult if you've ever inherited a presentation to speak to it. I always recommend people to work on it themselves and make it their own, because otherwise there's always this disconnect. So I think it's very hard to interpret. But, as some examples, again, this is very hard to read. My screen's not even that big, but it's very hard. Again, nice use of animation, but I'm torn. Which image am I looking at? So nice quality image. Everyone's together, so it replaces the first one, collaboration. You talk about collaboration, and then you can talk about the bullying. Again, having the nice reference at the bottom, nice and clean and neat. So the image becomes the hero of your story rather than trying to fit everything in. You don't have a limit on the number of slides for a TEDx talk. Most situations you don't. Sometimes they put some sort of random, oh, you must only have 10 slides, which doesn't make sense because it depends on how you use the slides. But, don't restrict yourself, because sometimes you'll be 1 slide, 2 slide, 3 slide, you'll go through them very quickly because it helps us to follow them. And other times you'll be sitting on the same slide for 2 or 3 minutes. So the number of slides to me doesn't necessarily tell you anything.
So just one question, because I think with the paradox, and the reason I wanted them to be side by side is one, so the logistics of using slides as tools versus putting people into the paradox itself. So for me, with my, as you can see, needing to expand, learn how to do better slides for the brain. But here I genuinely thought if they're side by side, it will create this cognitive dissonance or the paradox itself.
Sure.
And so would you recommend it to overwhelm people this way?
No,
or is it
no, I
recommended?
think I get what you mean, and I do understand, and I did hesitate doing the transformation I did here. You can have them side by side, definitely. But then I think a simple tweak you could have here is you have them exactly the same size.
Same size, okay.
For example, so them kind of crossing over is a little bit disconcerting to me. Also, you could just have the nurse and the placard. You don't need the words at the beginning. So they just need to, if you want to be paradoxical, you want them to be everything else the same.
Same.
So
yes.
have a comic and then a photo,
okay,
or an image, and like it's the closer they are for everything else, the more the paradox actually stands out to us.
Okay.
So yeah, that could work as well.
Okay, great. No, that's good.
Or you put it on top of it. So you go that, and then it feels like you could even do a simple transition where you like this image on top, sort of splashed on top of it or something like that. But no, I do understand it's we thought this and now it's like this. We thought this, but in fact it's that. I do get that. So that could definitely work, but just make them so they're really. So again, here, maybe this isn't the best image. It needs to be an image of bullying. Oh, we thought we were all together, but in fact, something aggressive. But they look the same otherwise. The same look and feel, because then it jumps out at you the differences. In fact,
for sure, I hear you, and it's that decreasing the energy for the person to read.
Yeah, and then they don't necessarily think about everything I'm thinking about, but it comes across in the overall impression. So again, this one we've talked about before. There's a quality issue with the journal citation and just too many words, even though you've nicely circled, which I really encourage people to do. Circle the part we should look at, especially in graphs and things. That can work well. But here, conflict is a killer. That's all you need. Then we listen to you, because if you look back at your notes, you're showing that you're well connected and you know what they're talking about in the industry, but it's you talking now.
Exactly.
And then you can quote them. So just conflict is a killer. That is your headline. It's not a heading, it's a headline. There's your key message to take away.
Yes.
We've talked about this one as well. And this is kind of goes back to the paradox, the assumptions, realities. And that can work. At least this is a little bit closer to similar. I would probably position them a little bit different. They look a little bit awkward to me on the page. And I think I just said, just talk. I don't see how they add to what you're saying. You say it well, and when you read your notes or you watch your video, you say it well. You don't necessarily need an image.
Yes, so you're touching on confidence, right? It's being confident in myself as well. And as we're talking now, I realize that I'm relying on others, like who support what I'm saying. My voice was shaking for a reason. It was the first time that I was speaking truth to power in a place where it's recorded and people can rewatch it. So this speaks to the slides being, I'm saying stuff that's also backed up by hundreds of other folks. So I think this was my confidence gap.
I get that. That's the imposter syndrome sort of creeping onto your shoulder. We all suffer from that. And I get that totally. One thing that can help, other than you knowing that you have all of this behind you, is to take it away from you and think about what you're delivering to the person, right? To the audience, to that nurse that you want to touch them. So we kind of need to get rid of our ego, and we need to think, They can go and look at things. You can leave links. You can talk about, you know, referring to different things. But you are there to give them this motivation, this message. And putting too much on the slides, or speaking too quickly, or putting lots of jargon, or running around the stage, all of these things detract from your message and are not helpful for the audience. So it's just one thing where if you're in service to your audience, that can kind of flip it around. Rather than thinking about you and your, oh, who am I to say this? And this is, you know, you're worried about it. Just go, well, what do they need? They don't need a slide. I can talk directly to them. I don't say that I know everything, that I'm perfect. I'm telling my story, my point of view. No one expects more than that, right?
Yes.
And
and the next presentations I've done, it has flipped a switch. So after your little coaching and now going through these slides, even in my lectures, I now talk about the story, and then here's what you can read about it. Talk about the story, and here. So I'm another person, even though this wasn't the best presentation and I'm not proud of it, but it has given me that step to the next level to be.
That's brilliant. And you should be proud of it, because it is, you know, we failure, it's not even a failure, but every experience we do, even when it's not as good as we want it to be, we learn, and you've definitely learned. So you should be proud, because if you hadn't put yourself out there, hadn't pushed yourself to do it, you wouldn't now be at the stage you are. And it's a process, right? And you continue to improve and grow, and that's what it's all about. So, you know, don't beat yourself up about it.
Right.
Again, these ones I just like, you don't need it. Talk, Renata. I just want to hear you.
Yeah.
Again, these two images, two. Why do we need two? You just go one.
Yes.
And pause there, so, you know, people can read and go, oof.
And so, as I mentioned, there wasn't an audience, but the recording crew, about 10 of them, and they all giggled. So they even got it, even though they're not. Yes.
Yeah, they're not necessarily your target audience, but yeah, I mean, it's powerful. This is why images are so powerful, right? We haven't said anything, but the people watching this one are like, wow. I mean, it's laughable. Yeah, you have to laugh, because otherwise, you know, you cry. Again, just simple. This one or other. We don't need both. Just bring it in one at a time. This is your message. It's very visual. 1 + 1 = 2. You don't need a quote as well. You know, you need to choose sometimes.
Yeah.
This image, not great. Again, we've got an image and we've got a quote. They don't necessarily go together. I understand why they're together, but they don't necessarily go together. So, you know, maybe I couldn't find a better image. I quickly looked, you know, they're different tracks. So you take the image becomes the hero of the slide. I'm sure you could find another sign like that. I couldn't quickly find one, but, you know, another one that tells people what you're saying, illustrates what you're saying in a different way. We've talked about this one. I think, again, disruptors in nursing exist at all levels. And then you can mention, I thought about putting the different 4 levels, but you say it, so you don't need to put it as well. I don't think always, you know. This one. So what would you do for this one, Renata?
Good question. So definitely too long now. And I would either summarize it with words. So again, it could just be something I say with a blank slide, like it doesn't need a slide or an image that represents it. But this is so important, because my students are all about just, you know, consuming knowledge all the time, not recognizing that this whole idea of best evidence at the time is the reason we're in a pickle of not adapting. And, you know, science is new evidence into healthcare practice is a 17-year gap. Yeah. So this is it. This is, and again, if Albert Einstein says it, it's better than Renata Mares saying it.
So maybe you can say, you know, before you put this on, before you put anything on the side, maybe some of you heard of Albert Einstein, sort of, and pause, you know, and people are like, yeah, but of course. And then say, well, I love this quote because it says everything I need to say. You bring up the quote and you read the quote with us. Imagination is more important than knowledge. For knowledge is limited to all we now know and understand, while imagination embraces the entire world. Really take your time, read it with us. If it's that important to you, keep it, but make it part of your speech. And that could be really powerful. And bring in something like that, or you probably know Albert Einstein, do you know Mr. Einstein? Make it light, and then it's a beautiful quote, and you can make a lot of it with your voice, as we've talked about as well, really drawing it out. It's important to you, keep it there, do that. Again, you've used animation beautifully here. This one, we're coming to the end of your presentation as well, so you've delivered most of your message. Another way you could do it here, because you've done the animation, is you pause here. Does anyone know, and it's a rhetorical question, you're not expecting someone to reply, but does anyone know who said this? What is now proved was once only imagined. Well, it's William Blake, English, in English. So I wouldn't change that, but you could make more of it, because in your speech it illustrates what you're saying, but then either say it or don't say it. There needs to be a reason why something's on the slide, especially words, right? And in a way, this one, it says the same, but it's an extension of what the Albert Einstein said. So I think you need to choose. You can't include everything. And this is always difficult, right? To choose what exactly you need to include. And that's why it's so important to be really clear about what you want your audience to think, feel, or do before you even go into the presentation, because that's going to help you sort of get rid of all of the extra stuff that you have.
Yes.
This image is great. But again, you could possibly find another one which is better quality, and maybe just the image, and you leave it up there for a couple of seconds, and then you say, someone wise once said, you can choose to live in the front row or the third row, and then you get people to go, oh, aha, yeah, that's funny, I see the relevance. That could work well. The other thing you could do is flip it, because I think your call to action is more powerful than that. You're not saying they have a choice. You're almost inviting them to sit in the front row with you. No?
Yes.
So you could flip it around and just have the image without the quote and say, now, who's ready to come and sit in the front row with me? We need you in the front row, living life to the full, pushing things forward, sort of thing. And kind of inspirational. And that's what TEDx often look for, right? Something inspirational. So a different way of seeing things. This one we've talked about already. Again, this one, I'm torn. Am I looking at the picture? Am I reading the quote? Another quote. So you need to be careful with all the quotes of very smart men, but well, not only men. You've got Maya Angelou is there as well, but there's a lot in there. You don't need to put in all of your quotes. Be more picky. A really well-placed, relevant quote, one in your presentation, is much more powerful than 4 or 5. Yeah. So I think be careful there.
And this one I actually read every time I talk about either adaptation, public health, or adaptable folks in general. So this quote is, I think, the one that I need to keep compared to all the other ones I can describe.
And this is the sort of quote that maybe you could leave at the end of your speech. You don't mention it, but it's your end instead of your thank you slide, which you don't do. And, it's rare that you need to do a thank you slide, I think. So this could be, Renata's slide that she always leaves. Or you could just say even, I'm going to leave you with one of my favorite quotes from Mr. Darwin, which talks about my approach to the importance of adaptability. And you leave it there, and then everyone goes, what? Amazing. And then they can read it, right?
Yes.
Cool. That was a lot.
No, this is great. This is so helpful. So I'm grateful.
Good. So what are your main takeaways, Renata?
Okay, so I made some notes. Definitely the 3 lessons, which I'm just going to list off, which is being able to make my slides, use them as a tool. And every slide, I need to make the decision between, do I want people reading or do I want people listening? So that's very key for me. Being a tour guide of your slide
I love that.
is really good, because when you did it, I like it. So of course, now I'm going to be much more conscious of that.
Brilliant.
And then the clear images. So even now as we speak, I'm building a curriculum as well as teaching. And the time it takes is just, so if I had like 3 assistants that could help me build those, but if I'm doing something like a TEDx, which is quite a big milestone, to take the time, double the time to make sure that my images are clear, because that's giving respect to not only the audience, but to the images themselves.
Yep. And I think, as you go, even if you're short on time, you can collect good images on the way and reuse them, right? You don't need to always reuse a thing. When you find a good image, you copy, paste it, and you can reuse it. So yeah, and then maybe you have an intern or an assistant at some stage who can help you put some of these infographics together. The key ones that you reuse, it really does make a difference in finding those good images. But yeah, don't waste your time finding the perfect image. It's not worth it. If you can't find one, we'd love to see your smiley face instead.
Sounds good. Note to self.
Brilliant. Well, I'm going to send you that new PowerPoint to hopefully give you some other ideas. Was there anything else that you wanted to?
Oh, I read my notes. So definitely on the confidence. So now talking with you, again, another growth milestone is for me to actually say it out loud that it was confident. So my busy PowerPoints for the students is definitely study notes, but this TED Talk was really just a crutch to help me say those truths against, again, the more powerful. And making it a TEDx and knowing that it was recorded, I was very conscious of having things backed up, and coming from a profession that also, so being in healthcare, you're always under the watchdog, so to speak. And so you have to be really well referenced.
Yes.
But TEDx allows, so I've watched TEDx, and my number one, you can cut this out. So my number one TEDx speaker is James Kunstler, and he talks about the ghastly tragedy of suburbia, and he uses quite loosely images and whatever. So maybe I also followed his lead, just because I really like the way he used images and the way he told a very serious social problem. So that's another thing. Maybe I use the
you
wrong.
have a style, right? You should develop your own style. There's no, as I keep saying, there's no right or wrong way. It needs to feel good to you, but I think you can evolve your style and hide less behind some images and some references. Of course, in academia and in healthcare and many other scientific based industries, you need to be published, you need to reference, etc. Be very careful of that. But there's also value in realizing that you are there speaking for a reason. So my challenge to you now, Renata, is will you re-record your presentation?
Okay.
Whether it's a TEDx or just on Zoom yourself, or with me if you wanted, to see if you can move your message to the next level.
Okay, I like that. Scary, but I like it.
Yeah. But yeah, you only grow when you get pushed out of your comfort zone, right?
For sure. Okay.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for letting me use you as a guinea pig. I hope that was useful, and I hope it's useful to everyone else also seeing how we can up the PowerPoint game so that our audience understands our message better, which is exactly the aim of communicating, full stop, right?
Exactly. Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome.